our plan was to put some money in the budget to do the analysis. And then I think really in terms of putting our teeth into it, in terms of timing, is when that analysis comes back, which would probably be later this summer, I would imagine. But in terms of at least having it as a budget item, you may recall that the previous harbor master had projected this at its 2017 expenditure.
He did, yeah, I remember that. As I said, we've been thinking about it, but his sense of urgency wasn't as great as we've heard this evening.
Right, and I think it's probably the nature of the beast that I guess kind of once it hits that kind of critical threshold, it starts to, the filtration fills up a lot quicker than, just some straight line of deterioration. Right. So, it has always been in our plan. Right. It's just a matter of we may need to push it forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is, I think, a good point that Alan made was that, if you wait and it builds up, it's going to cost you that much more.
Every year.
You go down every foot.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we get it. We are now on the air. Okay. If there's anybody actually watching, we've had some TV difficulties, but I guess we're now on the air, and if there's anybody out there, hello, and mostly on their oral communications. We've had a number of excellent presentations on the concern of marina boaters over the silting situation, and suggesting that we do an analysis of where we're at and maybe do some dredging sooner rather than later. So that's most of the conversation that's occurred to this point. And I think that summarizes where we've been at. And on June 10th, we will have the marina as a part of the budget conversation. And so this evening then, unless there's any further oral communications or comments from council, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is an overview.
Can I make one comment?
Oh, of course.
I just wanted to let the council know that Alan Edwards and some of the other boaters have brought this up to me. Alan was involved in emailing me about this subject, and so I did suggest that he brings it up and forwarded the information to staff and to the entire council so that we all had that information available to us. It just was, I think, sent to us today, but it is something I wanted to let you know that I had been having some conversations and have been getting some information from the boaters out at the marina about this situation. So I want to thank them all for coming and for bringing it so that it's a priority for us to look at.
Okay. Thank you. That's what we're here for, right?
That's what we're here for.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we now move on to the main agenda item for the evening, which is the budget workshop. And for presenting the overview of the 2013-14 budget, we have City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm going to make some brief comments up front, and then Stuart's going to walk you through 45 scintillating PowerPoint slides.
Before you do that, can I did get this on email. I don't know if we had this printed for us. If it was in my box, I didn't get a chance to check. If it wasn't, I don't need one. I just didn't know if I was supposed to have that.
I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, I don't need it printed if you didn't print it. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one who didn't pick up a copy.
We've been changing it almost up till the moment here.
I assumed so.
We'll make, as soon as tonight's over, we'll make copies for all of you, as well as have it on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in presentation of the 2013-14 proposed budget, so we had some follow-up items from last year. As you recall, back in our discussions of a year ago, it was brought forward by our current mayor that we kind of need to go back and take a fresh look at the organization chart and updated to be current, because we have gone through a significant number of changes over the last 4 to 5 years, reduction of staff of considerable numbers of positions, so that we wanted to kind of get the organization chart updated and be current and more relevant. The chart you see there on the screen now is the updated organizational chart. This reflects the changes that we made last December, as well as some proposed changes into this year with some additional staffing. We did note, I would like to note down at the bottom of, under Deputy Finance Director, that column, you will see a position called Open Space Analyst. As you're aware, that position has come open with a retirement. And right now, we have it in the budget as an open space analyst. There has been some conversation at the Finance Committee subcommittee and at the Economic Development Subcommittee of combining that position into a analyst position that would handle the Open Space Committee as well as the Economic Development Subcommittee and subsequent Citizens Committee in the Economic Development if we ended up going in that direction. That's not currently in the budget, but I think that is going to be probably one of the points of conversation during your budget deliberations. So I did want to point that out. The senior analyst under that column, where it says Senior Analyst Citizen Engagement, that's not a new position, but it is a renamed position, reclassified position that's being proposed. Put a name to it, that's Caroline, who does all of our citizen, I won't say all of our citizen engagement, but does a lot of it, and kind of is the point person with that, dealing with our website as well as dealing with a lot of citizen groups over various projects. And so we thought this title more accurately reflects the work that she does. Okay. So follow-up from the previous year. As I just stated, the organization and classifications that were brought to the council in September of 2012. You remember a year ago, we were going through the pains of understanding the life after redevelopment and the creation of a thing called a successor agency. And it was a deliberation of the council that we ought to make it very clear that the successor agency is not the city of Brisbane, and it should be separately noted and separately accounted for. So that's what we've done with the separation of the successor agency budget. And as you know, throughout the year, as budget issues or any kind of successor agency issues happen, it comes as a separate agenda, and you deal with it as the same number of you, but as a different body. We've completed the separation of the successor agency per Senate Bill 1484, and both the successor agencies and the housing DDRs, which is due diligent review, have been completed and timely and have been approved by the Department of Finance, which is DOF, and we're waiting for completion of the property disposition. We already talked about this earlier this evening, but the marina maintenance and funding, that was brought to the council in a series of workshops. It's included in the, I think that's supposed to be in the 13-14 budget, so that should be 13-14 there. We have been working that issue through the council infrastructure, or not infrastructure subcommittee, what do we call ourselves? Facilities subcommittee, thank you. And so there's actually a few changes from what you saw last fall, but it's really more of just kind of moving some of the work up and getting more work done in this next upcoming couple of years. As you recall, our plan is to hire some maintenance workers, purchase the materials, and have that done more or less in-house over the next 2+ years.
Yeah, and I guess now we have this interesting question that was raised this evening, which the staff will have to look into about.
We'll take a look at that.
Which comes first?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Obviously, we're gearing up for the former.
Right.
But we'll take a look at that issue.
Okay.
If there's any questions as we go along, please feel free to stop me. Okay, so in terms of additional issues, we've looked at the impact of separating the marina and the Parks and Recreation budget. This was presented to the Finance Subcommittee and will be presented as part of this budget. Again, I'm sorry, that should be the 13-14 budget. That is the separation out of the marina from the Parks and Recreation and moving Parks and Recreation into the general fund is included in the proposed 2013-14 budget. We've had a lot of discussion, as you know, over the last year with regards to Parks and Recreation programming. And the Parks and Recreation Commission has been busy at work in a variety of subcommittees and working up through their committee as a whole. They've reviewed the teen services programs and skateboard park issue, and that will be discussed and is included in the 2013-14 budget. Council has approved new rates for the pool operation and for the Mission Blue facility. The new rates for the community park will be included in the fee schedule as part of the 13-14 budget. You will hear of their priorities with regards to capital improvement projects when we get to the capital facilities budget on the 10th. That has been discussed with the facilities subcommittee already. And then there's two items at the bottom there, developing a plan for long-term funding of parks and recreation programs exclusive of the general fund. That's an ongoing project that the Parks and Recreation Commission has taken on and will be reporting back to the council at some future point, as well as developing a funding mechanism for public art. As you may recall, they got the council's go-ahead and start studying that issue. Mm-hmm. So issues that will be discussed with regards to this budget upcoming year, we will be discussing within the budget some of the economic development program issues. We have money in there for the Urban Land Institute charrette of Crocker Park. As we've discussed at the council level before, the full economic development plan will be coming back to the council in August, and we'll have a more thorough discussion at that point in time. The fire station analysis and options, the council subcommittee on facilities has met. We met over at the fire station, had a pretty good and I think conversation about what options we ought to take. And so we're looking at some more interim sort of solutions and some different options with regards to that. And the Public Works Director will be discussing that when we get to the facilities or the capital projects part of the budget. And then, as we've been talking all night, it seems like on the Parks and Recreation Marina separation, again, that is included in this budget.
Clay, before you
Yes.
go to the next slide, so on the fire station analysis and options, were you going to look at, well, let me go back. From what I've been told, the particular design of the firehouse is a duplicate model or almost duplicate model of another firehouse in Marin County, is it, somewhere?
Yeah, I think that there are similar, although I think the architect tells us that there was some uniqueness to this project too. I've also heard that it's cookie cutter, so
Yeah.
a lot of different stories over the years.
And so when this does come to us, I mean, is it possible to get that?
Well, we'll
I mean,
try
I know
to
it's not
know.
really a budget thing, but,
Yeah. I mean, we'll try to narrow it down. I mean, I guess we've narrowed it down that it's either design, construction, or materials. It's a quandary, to be honest, and I think that's what you're going to really hear from the subcommittee and from the Public Works Director is that instead of throwing a lot of money at it, maybe we ought to throw a little bit of money and see if we can get it back operating and see how those improvements work. Mm-hmm. Because the problem is that, you know, a lot of people think they got the solution, but we've never been able to get a really sound solution to that problem. And we want to keep, we would like to get back into that station. I mean, you know, we've got a facility there that is not that old, as, you know,
21 years.
yeah, it keeps getting remarked to me that
Yes.
it's not that old, we should be able to use it. You know, there has been some talk that at some point in the future, you know, maybe it's not in the right location, but that's probably many, many years into the future. So it certainly seems like a good strategy to try to figure out some sort of interim strategy that we can use it,
Yes.
get back into it, use it over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And we may have to throw a couple, you know, we may have to do a couple different projects over that period of time. So Randy will get into more detail on some of the strategies that he's looking at, and we've had a good discussion with the subcommittee, and we'll probably have a further, well, we plan on having a further discussion later on in June with the subcommittee after he's had an opportunity to talk to a couple contractors.
How much do we budget right now for the temporary facilities for the firefighters?
We have about 14,000 a year in there.
Okay, so
It's not a huge amount, but,
no.
you know,
It adds up, though. I mean, I guess if you were in there for, how many years have they been in there now? About 3?
yeah, it's probably, time goes by.
It does
a
go
couple,
by.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, it works, it's functional, but, you know, obviously, we'd like to get back into the station.
yeah, especially when you own something as opposed to renting.
It's like living on a tent out in front of your house, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up, just to add to what you already said. In the Facilities Committee, you know, we did have this dedicated session to the fire station, and of course, the Public Works Director was there, and the Fire Chief was there, and we went out, had the field trip, talked about all these options, and sort of everyone agreed to go do some homework, and that isn't due to be presented until our next meeting, which I think is the end of June.
Right.
But the question of, okay, so is this similar to elsewhere, and how come we're having problems if they're not having them elsewhere? And that set of questions, I think, if I remember correctly, the fire chief agreed to investigate, you know, what's going on with the different fire station architects, and how different are we, and you know, are there things that we can do that fit within the more general approach to fire station design. And I think that was one of the subjects we were going to talk about at our next meeting. Am I correct about that? Is that your understanding, Mr. Meyer?
Yeah, and we've done some of that, and we're running into dead ends as it relates to that. And I don't know that the fire station we're talking about in Marin is what this is constructed in the same way, and talking to people that we continue to look into it.
Okay.
But there's not going to be as much, we'll say, good information. None of the architects have anybody that is an expert at coming in and looking at these things. So what the Public Works Director has been doing is getting some people to come in, and he'll have some information related to that. But we continue to look at it. But we're not having much success as it relates to those discussions you were talking about.
Right, okay. We did talk about all this stuff, and so the staff has been pursuing it, and that's interesting. That's new information for me. And since we're not really going to be meeting until the end of June, how much more we're going to have on this, you know, during the budget discussion is, I would say, probably problematic.
Yeah, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but I think we put a placeholder in the budget of some amount of money well, or we will be putting a placeholder in terms of the capital budget, so that we have, you know, identified that we would like to do a project in the next year, and then obviously if we move further into the year, we'll be discussing what that project might be.
Yes, I think that would be a prudent thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So revenue opportunities. We are continuing to have a conversation of sorts with Kinder Morgan with regards to the tank fuel facility, and we do have a meeting coming up later this week. We do need to bring back to the council by your first meeting of August a proposed ballot, if we're going to go to the November ballot, which I think has been our goal.
Mm-hmm.
And we will certainly be involving the next city attorney in this issue. within 5 or so minutes after he.
Yeah.
The Economic Development Program, again, we will be bringing this in full to the council in early August. Obviously, economic development is something that takes place over a long period of time, so there's not immediate shot in the arm in terms of revenue, but we do believe that there are ways to kind of improve our business climate and business opportunities here. And then finally, the Recology business license, just a reminder that we've basically implemented 2.1 million of a potential $3 million revenue source. That additional revenue would happen if and only when a project was approved for them. Issues needing further study. We've had a lot of discussion at the finance subcommittee level about the program-based budget. I think we've made significant progress this year, but we still have further progress to make. This will help us in terms of putting together an approach to set priorities, which I think is a conversation that the council's been having for over a year now. So that's the goal, is that we can marry those two things up and be able to have that conversation in a more realistic fashion this next year. The city's capital improvement program, we adopted a plan back in, I believe, 2008, and because of the recession and all the financial issues, we have not updated it since that point in time, in part because we didn't have any money to work with. So it just wasn't a priority. As you know, we're going to be bringing forward capital improvements in the marina, capital improvements in the water and sewer area, and potentially in the fire department or fire station this year. So we have a kind of a renewed, movement in terms of our capital improvement program. You'll see those presented to you on the 10th, and then I think during the next year we want to get back and kind of do a little more homework in terms of our longer-term projections. Tonight's conversation was kind of illustrative of that. I mean, the dredging is always been on the capital improvement plan, but it's a matter of timing. And so I think you have to constantly be looking at your plan in terms of the timing and the adequacy of that timing. That's just one example.
Yeah, Clay, in regards to the dredging and, just having that, getting that feedback from those boaters, it seems like there is a willingness to contribute, from the boating community financially, if they know that work is going to be done. And of course, I don't think we could expect all of the money coming from the boaters, then our rates would be so high that we're not competitive. So you're trying to find that balance, but maybe this is something that you could perhaps bring to our next meeting, where, looking at some kind of matching type of situation. We raise the rates, a little bit, where we're still competitive, but then the city will match whatever it is to make those improvements.
One approach, and kind of getting back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of if you bond it, you could actually set it up so that you wouldn't really implement rates until the work was done. So the boater doesn't have to start paying for it until they actually benefit from it. And then you set your bond payments up, subsequent to that, or something close to that.
Sure, then you're seeing the result. Right now. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, our former harbor master, Ted Warburton, always had the philosophy that, if you're going to do rate increases, show some benefit to the boat owner, whether it was the restrooms or, other kinds of stuff. So I think there's a lot of, value to that. I think people are more willing to absorb a rate increase if they feel like they're, purchasing something.
They're getting something for it.
Yeah, they're getting something for it.
Yes.
Actually, our rates are very competitive right now.
Yeah.
Extremely competitive.
Yeah, so there might be some.
We're on the low end of the spectrum.
Right, and so,
Right.
is that, looking at things like rates, I mean, I don't know if that is a budget-related issue, or is that something that we?
Yeah, I mean, we've always brought that forward to the council, I think usually in the July, August time period in the past. I think that we need to kind of take a fresh look at where we want to be in the market. Ted's philosophy was always to be towards, let's say, the bottom third,
Yes.
maybe even lower than that. Maybe it was the bottom fourth. But his philosophy is always towards the bottom part, to keep the occupancy up, and also to recognize that we didn't have a lot of amenities out there, and we are kind of far from the main action. So there's a lot of, kind of conversation you need to have around where in the marketplace you want to, set yourself. We've never really tried to say, okay, here's the average of the rates, let's just be in the average, that we haven't taken that approach.
Yes, no, you're right about that. And, in August, we're going to be also bringing the Sierra Point design guidelines, hopefully to the council for further discussion. I mean, and there's, ways to be looking at, what is the bigger picture for Sierra Point as far as, public engagement, not just, businesses out there, but, what are the things that would entice people to go out to Sierra Point, make amenities better for the boaters, and so that we can perhaps be in a different threshold of marina fees that, because, you have, whether you're in the bottom end or in the middle end or the top end, the dredging costs the same, fixing the dock costs the same, and so, but if you're providing the things that make it more attractive to someone to spend more money, of course, you also don't want to push out the little guy either. I mean, so there's that balance. I mean, you don't want to have a bunch of rich people out at the marina. I mean, it's nice having a nice mix too. So it's trying to find that balance. So
Yeah, there's a lot of issues involved with it.
yeah.
Okay, the other issues needing further discussion, we just talked about the program-based budget, city's capital improvement plan, development of policies for the next recession. This kind of gets into the whole conversation about priorities. It also gets into the conversation about the fund balance and strategies to try to increase that fund balance. As you know, the fact that we were in a good fund balance position in 2007, 2008 really helped in terms of being able to weather that storm. General plan update. This is the year that we're going to have a general plan update. The EIR for the Baylands, as you know, is we are within days of its publication, and that's really was the predicate for being able to do the general plan update. So we will be carrying over money, or rebudgeting money, I should say, for in the 2013-14 year that we had budgeted in the previous year. For the environmental work that we will need to do and other consultant work we will need to do with regards to the general plan update. I think we'll also have to come back to council and have a conversation about what all that means for you now, because at one point in time, the council had gone through all that, planning commission had gone through all the policies and then updated all that, but that's 5 or 6 years old now.
Yeah.
And so, I would think that there's probably a good chance you're going to want to revisit that. And then the final item is the NIPD's financial analysis, the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. We chose as a city many years ago not to participate in a countywide, I believe it was a 218 vote, to help fund that program. So that's something that we may want to take a look at. And just how we're going to continue to fund this program. This is one of those things that has really creeped over the years. A lot of it because of federal regulation, but a lot of it because of our own state regulations. And we basically have had Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is put together. I mean, they've implemented a lot of, I think, probably very progressive programs, but they have really had the attitude that you on a local level just need to figure it out. And so
We need to figure out how to pay for it.
how to pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do it.
So what was, when I recall, 10, 12 years ago, I think we were putting $20,000 a year into this. You're now, starting to look at numbers that are in the high fives, if not into the sixes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that was a choice the council made to absorb it instead of passing it on to.
Right. It was a minor number, and we felt like we could live with it at that time.
Those were good days then.
Times have changed.
Times always change. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to the finance director, and he'll walk you through the rest of the slides.
Okay, thank you.
Evening, council. First
Good
is-
evening, Finance Director.
Thank you. You threw me off. That wasn't on my script. Sorry. So the first,
Wearing his mortician outfit.
it's not quite as bad. I could have worn a white with a black tie. It's not the worst.
Again, you're throwing him off.
You are. The first slide is the mission statement. I've changed it slightly from what we have seen in the past. In the past, I started off with "We, the employees of Brisbane," and I try to make it more of a mission statement look to it than we've had in the past. Haven't really changed the words at all. Just try to talk about, the mission is efficiently providing quality public services, facilities, and programs, and then by respecting community values, and then applying resources and commitment to meet prospective challenges and the expectations of the citizens and the business community of Brisbane. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue as well as some other mission statements, but I think that first sentence does, and I think that first sentence is who we are. We try to efficiently provide quality public services, facilities, and programs. Last year I was coming to you with a budget that was very much a reaction to a recession. We weren't quite sure what our revenues were going to be in the upcoming year. We had some basic projections, but we still had a lot of unknowns. I think we are at the point where I can say we have a more stable budget, and we're a budget for a more stable time. We have a better understanding of what our revenues are, and when you know what your revenues are, it's easier to get your expenditures to meet those revenues. The budget book that I've handed out, the preliminary budget, and I will let you know it is a preliminary budget, based on council input, based on council direction. It will change. There are probably some corrections on things like, I found out the page numbers. We decided to go from page 120 back to page number 1. It's just kind of a new way of doing math, we thought. So there are things like that we will need to update and change. But the budget shows 4 years worth of actual revenues and expenditures by account. It shows what was adopted in fiscal year 12-13 and the actuals for the previous years. And the recommended budget is based on continuation of the 2012-2013 services plus some new services or personnel. And Clay has already talked about some of them, and I'll go through others as I go through this. The next section that I always like to start off with is giving you the 30,000-foot picture, the 5-year budget projections. Just so I can feel good about myself, I like to tell you what my assumptions were. Recology is projected to provide $2.1 million. They gave us, this year we have $2.1 million. We have another $2.1 million in next year's budget. Sales tax is projected at $2.4 million for fiscal year 13-14, and it grows 3% a year thereafter. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get into the 13-14 budget as to the specifics for the current year. These projections are based on our Muni Services projections. Muni Services is our sales tax auditor. So they have statewide information. They have particular information for us. They have particular information for the kinds of businesses that we have in town, and they make a projection. And they're projecting for the next few years a 3% growth would be what they would say is our most likely scenario. So that's why we used it. Northeast Ridge, new homes increased property tax by $100,000, not in this year, but my projection is for next year. We are beginning to have a number of those homes sell on pre-sale. So we will start seeing that revenue come in. We have $100,000 in new property tax revenue from the old RDA area, and this grows at 2% a year. In fact, I think that $100,000 is probably on the low side. We just saw our first number for the next ROPS form. You already adopted the ROPS. This is the one for the next fiscal year. The amount of money that is out there for the city of Brisbane is about $150,000, and that's just for half a year. So that $100,000 a year projection is on the lower side. As I've said in the past, I always try and make lower projections on revenues and slightly higher projections on expenditures, so that way we're not in a bad fiscal situation at the end of the year. I'm also projecting in 2013, 2014 to use about $650,000 out of liability fund. This is money that has been saved over a number of years. We have a total reserve of $900,000. At the last meeting, when we went over the CAFR, you saw one of the notes that Betsy showed you was the liability note. And what we're required is we're self-insured for the first $25,000 of a loss. And then from $25,000 to $1 million, it is covered through our insurance JPIA. And then from $1 million to $28 million, the JPA has excess insurance above that. So it would take a lot of money for us to burn through $250,000 in reserve. It would take 10 losses for us to pay. And then we're also looking at charging a franchise fee for the marina of 8% of their revenues. This is similar to what we would collect off of the billboards. So this is the recognition that the marina is an asset for the entire city, not just for the boaters. Other assumptions is that the PERS rates increase 5% over 5 years for non-safety employees and 8% for safety employees. And this is the information that we're getting from PERS. We talked a little bit about this, I think, at a previous, I can't remember if I did it at a council meeting or if I did it at a finance subcommittee, but there's a number of assumptions that they're changing. There's also going to be a change in what they're anticipating for their discount rate. All of those should increase the rate of PERS. Workers' compensation and liability increase about 5% a year. This has been a historic average for us, so we're still projecting that kind of increase going forward. Inflation for supplies and services increase at about 1% a year. And then employee costs are estimates, but they are subject to negotiation. As you know, we're in the midst of the negotiations, so that's just estimates at this point. As we get through the negotiations, we'd be able to put better numbers in. And now for the small print. I know this is a seeing eye test, so I apologize for that. I was trying to get a lot of information on one slide, and it works really well on Excel and on my individual screen. But let me walk you through this. The top line, and I know I'm going to point to here, and that's going to mean nothing to anybody either here or at home, so I won't do that. Revenues are the projections based off of the assumptions. Projecting about $12 million in revenues for 13-14, increasing to about $13.9 million in 17-18. Expenditures are about $13.5 million in 13-14, increasing to about 14.7 in 17-18. So that would give us a deficit of about $1.5 million in the current fiscal year, decreasing to about $760,000 in fiscal year 17-18. Our beginning fund balance in the general fund and the rainy day fund combined is about $9.9 million. I think we will end up actually slightly higher than that based on some of the recent revenue numbers I've seen. But that's my best projection as of the time I did this. And it would go, if nothing changed, it would be about $4.5 million in 17-18. But let me walk you through some of the items in this year's budget, which is that middle section. So there is a liability fund transfer of $650,000. That's in the budget that we're recommending at this point in time. There's also $397,000 in sales tax money that is actually we're going to collect this year, and it should have been collected next year. And this is coming because of VWR. When VWR left town, and to the best of our knowledge, they are completely out of town as of the first quarter of fiscal year 12-13. We had Muni Services go out and do an audit of that, and they have confirmed it. I keep hearing rumors that they may have been in there past that, so we'll try and look at it again. But the state has given us money this current fiscal year in our property tax revenue, which is part of the triple flip, and I'll get to that in a second, of as if they were here for this entire year. So the way that the state works now with sales tax is the local collection is 1%, but we get 75% of that in cash as it's collected, and then we get 25% in property tax revenue. And this was due to Arnold Schwarzenegger's selling of bonds to balance the state budget back in 2006, yeah, around there. So what he needed to do is he needed a funding source to pay for his bonds. So the funding source he used was local sales tax. He then backfilled local sales tax with ERAF property tax. ERAF is the Education Revenue Augmentation Fund that all cities pay into to offset costs of the school districts. He then backfilled the ERAF fund with his own property tax. And the reason he couldn't pay his bonds directly with his own property tax was because the bond buyer said you need a new revenue source. So his new revenue source was our money. So now what happens is when we get our property tax, our 25% sales tax from property tax, the Board of Equalization has to estimate how much money we're going to collect in that year of sales tax. And then they tell the county to distribute that much money to us. Well, the state told the county to distribute $397,000 more in revenue in fiscal year 2012, 2013 than we should have gotten. So what they will do is next year take it out of our property tax.
Because they didn't know VWR was going to leave.
Right.
Okay.
So next year, as I said, we would have $2.4 million in sales tax coming in. However, I'm only budgeting for 2.1. And the reason, or 2 million. And the reason being, there's $400,000 that's already collected this year. Mm-hmm. So that money is going to be sitting in reserves this year.
They're going to have to give it back.
Right. So that's really not a ongoing deficit issue for next year. So the money's already in our reserves this year. The general plan update for $75,000, we have that budgeted in this fiscal year in 2012, 2013. We're not going to spend it in 2012, 2013. It's going to fall into our reserves. So therefore, when we budget for next year, we're actually budgeting the money that's in our reserves, not new money. There's $30,000 in our operating budget at the moment for our financial software. We talked about this at the last council meeting. This is probably a more appropriate item to be part of our CIP and come out of our business license tax. So what we should do is transfer $30,000 from our business license capital fund to the general fund to cover this cost. There's also $10,000 in this current year's budget to print the history book, and there's $38,000 in next year's budget to print the history book. Our best estimate at this moment is that it'll cost us $38,000 to print the history book, so we will have $10,000 falling into reserves this year. So when you net all of that out, we actually would have a deficit of about $375,000 in the general fund this year. And then when you look at the next section of the chart, which is also in small print, these are some of the new programs that we're looking at doing in this current fiscal year, which is contributing to our deficit position. We budgeted $5,000 additional money for acres management. Last year, because of the recession, we budgeted $10,000. We think $15,000 is a more appropriate ongoing figure. So we put that $5,000 into it, but that could be something that council decides that we don't want to, we don't want to do. We're budgeting money for volunteer projects. These are things that happen, that come up for us, like the community center, that cost staff time and it costs supplies and materials. And it doesn't, we get a lot of our assistance through volunteer labor, but volunteer labor still takes some costs for the city. We have the ULI charrette from the, as we talked about in the economic development. We have $11,000 new for co-sponsorships. These are things that are happening, such as we have the Zippy race coming on. On June 3rd, you will hear about an event up at Mission Blue for the 45th anniversary of the movie Bullet. So those are new co-sponsorships. And that's just an estimate. We have $95,000 in addition for additional human resource assistance. And this is due to a couple of things. One, as we have used Maria more for administrative purposes in the city manager's office, she has less time to do human resources work, so we are beginning to fall behind on some of our day-to-day type of workload. And then in addition to that, we have our Affordable Care Act issue, which is going to take a lot more of our time for bookkeeping and record keeping. So we recommend a full-time person to be for assistance in human resources, and that's the cost of the person plus benefits. We are also looking at adding 2 new police officers this year and then 1 additional police officer next year. The reason there's such a disparity in the cost between them is this year when we add the 2 new police officers, we are also eliminating 1 office person in the police department. As you know, the executive assistant for the police chief retired this year. We have not replaced that position. We are making do with the staff we have. We would anticipate continuing to do that. So the net cost this year between 2 new officers coming in and the person leaving is $145,000, and then we move forward. And then the other item out there is the difference with the marina and park and recreation split. So the marina generates about $670,000 in revenue above and beyond what it takes to operate the marina on a year-to-year basis. We anticipate an 8% franchise fee going into the general fund, so the net is $555,000 cost to the general fund due to that split. One of the things I would note when we talk about the marina, and this is just for my own edification, is that the marina's construction originally and the original dredging and all the buildings and all the docks was paid for through a bond from the redevelopment, through the redevelopment agency. That money is being paid for by property tax revenue, not being paid for by the boaters. If the boaters had to pay for the cost of the construction of the marina originally, it would probably be about another $1.5 million worth of annual costs to them. So by having it being paid for by our redevelopment agency, the boaters, right now we collect $1.5 million from the boaters. We would basically would have had to double the rate in order for them to pay for the place themselves. So when you take into these total new expenditures, they're about $831,000. So if all these new expenditures were not happening this year, we would in fact have about a $456,000 surplus this year. This is similar to the kinds of numbers I had talked about in the previous year. And then when you look out in the future, without any of the new programs, we would have about a $235,000 surplus. So it's just the deficit that we're looking at on a year-to-year basis is really caused by a lot of the new programs that we're thinking of. When you talk about having $761,000 deficit in fiscal year 17-18, there's a couple of issues that Clay brought up earlier that could very much account for that. We've got some money potentially coming from the tank farm with a new business license, and if the Recology project is permitted by that point in time, we would be collecting an extra $1 million from Recology. So I'm not overly concerned at this point in time on the $761,000 deficit. If something doesn't happen between now and then to help pay for that deficit, we would go into the same kinds of discussions we've had in the past. We would talk about, as Clay talked about, getting more towards some of the policies for dealing with the recession, on how we go back and reduce costs or look at additional revenues on a very concerted basis. And even given that level of deficit, we're still talking about, after 5 years, over $5 million in reserves in the city's general fund. So we still have plenty of time to deal with these kinds of issues. Not to say that we shouldn't be thinking about them, but it's not something that is a large concern for me tonight. Moving on to the 2013-2014 budget. Some of the budget highlights, as I said, we've got 2 new police officers in the budget, 1 new person in the HR due to the additional workload of the principal analyst and the Affordable Care Act requirements, money set aside for volunteer projects, additional money set aside for co-sponsorships, the Marina Parks and Recreation split. A big issue, which really, as you look through the detailed pages, which shows up, is we redid the distribution of personnel costs. So in the past, for instance, I was all charged to the finance department. In reality, I'm spending a portion of my time in open space and ecology, and I'm spending a portion of my time in parks and recreation. So that time for those departments were free. And as we're trying to get more towards a program budget, we're trying to allocate the costs of people and supplies and services to the programs that they work in, we redid all of that allocation. To make, from a ease and efficiency perspective, so all of the salaries are now allocated to a single line item in the budget. Sometimes it says part-time salary, sometimes it says salaries. To be real honest, they are the same to me at the moment, and I need to relabel that line item. We also redid the indirect cost survey that we do, or the indirect cost method that we do. So last time we did the indirect cost was back in '02. That was before we had the City Hall bond issue. Also at that time, the Central Services was a program that had the money had services being allocated to it, when in fact Central Services should have been distributed out. So the original indirect cost method wasn't 100% accurate. We redid that. We went over that issue with the Finance Committee. It seems to make more sense. It's a better distribution method now. Assumptions used in formulating this current budget. Hopefully I'm not going too fast, although I'm sure people in the back are saying, no, we're not fast enough yet. Sales tax is $1.9 million in the budget, 1.8 in ongoing, and then 180,000 in triple flip funds. This is what I just talked about previously. Property taxes 1.9 million. So this 1.9 million is still a couple of hundred thousands below what our high was in 2008, 2009. So in 2008, 2009, the county redid the property tax for a number of people based on the recession. And that was called an AB 8 correction. So we will see that AB 8 correction impact us, and we will get more revenue again at some point in the future. I just don't know when, so I'm not putting it in. So there were people who bought their houses between 2002 and 2008 during that time period. And the county went through and reduced their assessed value based on formula. And then when they got their reduction based on that formula, they then had a reduction in their property tax. The state law says that that reduction in property tax can be made up at any time that the assessor feels the property values are back to increase. So if Brisbane increases at 10% in actual value, then those properties that were reduced could be increased overnight. So some of the people who have lower tax rates now than they had previously may see their tax bills rise above the 2% that you would anticipate through Prop 13 formulas. I don't have any of that revenue in this year's budget, nor do I have any of that revenue in any future budget, or in any of my future projections. So another area where I've tried to be a little bit more conservative. Transient occupancy I have at 1,632,000, which, as you've seen through my monthly reports, is about what we're anticipating this year. So I'm not anticipating any new revenue for next fiscal year, even though we should probably see a little bit coming out of the America's Cup, just being our location near San Francisco and being an overflow area. Recology pays $2.1 million in business license. I think this is just a little bit on the low side because we also have an inflator in that agreement or in that tax. So we should see a little bit more come in. It could be $60,000, depending on what inflation is. But once again, I'm not going to project what that is. And as I said, the employee contracts are currently being negotiated, so there's nothing strictly in the budget for that. This is a similar slides that I showed last year. These are kinds of the savings that we've gone through over previous years. I'm going to go very quickly because these are exactly the same slides I showed last year. And that's how quick I'll go through them.
That was fast.
It was. Well, I promised you I was going to do this in a half an hour.
Blinked and I missed one.
Man, oh, there you go. So for this year, I will go through the same kinds of things that I normally go through, which is the total budget, which it talks about revenues and expenditures, the general fund overview, one-time expenditures. And Terry, I apologize for this. I tried for like half an hour to see if PowerPoint can do hashes as opposed to the colors, and it can't. I would have to go back and do all this again in Excel. So I apologize for that. But hopefully the labels make it make more sense than it did last year.
It does, and I'm only color deficient, not color.
No, I know that, and I just never know which colors I can't mix. And then I looked at it right now, I'm going, they all, I didn't know if these colors were good or not, because these are different colors than show up on your PowerPoint.
They look better on this screen
Yes.
than on that screen.
Yes.
On that screen, if you were just to color code them, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between several
That's Randy.
of
That's great.
That has different colors up there, sir?
them. Are you totally colorblind?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Don't drive with me at night with their
So run
stoplights.
run your slides through Randy for the mustard test now.
This is the best I could do, but I labeled it, so that was the goal. So this is for all funds, and as you would expect with all funds, charges for services is our largest revenue source, and that's because our charges for services includes our water and sewer rates. Property tax is our next largest, sales tax, transient occupancy tax, and that's kind of where you would expect it to happen. For expenditures, public works, is our largest expenditure. And debt service is our next largest expenditure. And then, you start looking at police and fire. Yeah, these are the kinds of things. But, public works, because it has our water and sewer, and our water and sewer is a fairly large expenditure source for us. Expenditures by type. I do have money out in the capital plan this year. We haven't had that in the past. Salaries and benefits are about 42%, services and supplies 27%. I think normally salaries and benefits are usually higher, but this is due to the reduction in staff that we've had over the past few years. It's also due to public works making do with more contract labor to maintain our parks and our parks and our landscape than we've had in the past.
Since we're using it for contract labor for some of our services, does that put them over into services and supplies?
Yes.
So it's just reallocating the funds that are being
Yes.
spent into a different category?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and Stuart, with the debt services, how much of that is interest?
I could get back to you on that.
Okay.
Probably the bulk of it, just based on that fact that we're still early on in a lot of our bond payments. Moving on to the general fund, and this is where you see, property tax goes up, licenses and permits goes up because the licenses and permits is where we have the recology business license tax. Sales tax is way down from what it has been in the past because VWR is out. Transient occupancy tax, I lost my percentage. It was there at one point. But those are our big, recology at 2.1, transient occupancy at 1.6, sales tax at 1.9, property tax at a little over 1.9. Those are the kinds of where we're really seeing the large revenue sources. On the expenditure side, police and fire catch up to public works because we take out the water and sewer side of it. So that's what you would see in most cities that have police and fire, that they are the majority and the bulk of the expenditures. Parks and recreation, we moved all of that back into the general fund. So it's not just the transfer out, but the full cost of our parks and recreation minus or it's the full cost of our parks and recreation. So that's why that one has increased over the year. I also have slides about different changes in the individual departmental budgets. In the city council, we have the additional cost and flexible benefit of the new council member. I'm assuming we're going to get a 5th council member come November, and we need to pay health benefits. Our last council member was a single. I'm not anticipating our next council member will have single health insurance, that they would have a higher level of health insurance. And then added a budget for volunteer projects. In the city clerk, I assume that the tank farm business license is going to be on the ballot. So so part of the cost of the election next year includes the additional cost for having it on the ballot. And then we're also not anticipating having the Citizens Academy. We had talked about doing this every other year. This year would be the other year, but with the draft EIR coming out in the near future and taking through the fall, which is normally when we do the Citizens Academy, we just thought there was not enough time for staff to put together an adequate Citizens Academy. Plus, I think a lot of the people who would be interested in a Citizens Academy will be spending a lot of time reviewing the draft EIR. So I don't know if there would be even enough time for citizens to show up to a Citizens Academy. So we're not budgeting for that this year. In the city manager's office, we're eliminating all of the funding for the urban forest management. This was the money that we had set aside for cutting down eucalyptus in town. We have actually taken care of those. We have not spent money out of this budget for the last couple of years. It seems time to recognize that and not budget for it. That we anticipate running the annual yard waste cleanup weekend the same as we did last year. So there was no money budgeted in 12-13. It went well. We didn't have issues. So we're going to cross our fingers and hope for no issues. We've added $11,000 for co-sponsorship. As I said, that would be something like the Zippy 5K race. It would be something like the Bullet or other kinds of co-sponsorship opportunities that come up to us. And the open space and ecology, we added $5,000 for additional vegetation management in the acres. Last year we reduced it to $10,000. So this year, we're increasing it an extra $5,000 to take care more of, especially as we buy new acres, to make sure that we get them properly mapped and we able to take care of them. We're also budgeting $2,000 for other projects sponsored by the Open Space and Ecology Committee. We have things like informational events that we haven't had in the budget, so we're putting that in.
On the additional 11,000 for co-sponsorship events,
Yes.
and I know you're putting it as an example, the Zippy 5K race. I just wouldn't want it to look to the public like we spent $11,000 on that particular event, which I'm assuming we didn't. I think that it would be, if you're going to use an example, I would want to see, at least on this for public, to know that it's for multiple events. And not just one particular event that we're singling out or that cost was used.
No,
I think it would just make more sense to the
Okay.
public to,
so before we put up on the website, I'll do that. I'll say multiple events, such, one such could be like,
as this and this.
Right.
If you're going to, I would put more than one
Okay.
there so that it,
Right.
it could be live at Mission Blue. It could be,
Right.
a variety of things that might appeal to more people.
right, I mean, if Live at Mission Blue goes from 3 to 5, we would need more money. Or if the Women's Club does something as an addition to the Shakespeare Club, you're right. There are many things that we use our co-sponsorship
I just
money
wouldn't,
for.
I wouldn't want Zippy to get blamed for
$11,000.
$11,000.
And they should not.
And they should not.
Okay, so I will make that change on the slides before they go on the website.
Thank you.
In finance, you will see a drop in our personnel costs, and that's because we're allocating people out to more where they belong. So, a portion of Caroline is working in Parks and Recreation. A portion of me is working in Parks and Recreation. A portion of me is in the successor agency. A portion of Deborah is now out in the water and sewer because half of her time is spent in water and sewer billing. A portion of Betsy's time is out in the successor agency. All of those things are being shown throughout the budget. So we're not, and that's why we have in the budget the personnel cost by position under the personnel allocations. So you know what each position costs us, because you could not find that back in the budget. And then last year, what I would do is show a sheet in front of each department about what was, a summary sheet for personnel in that. But since people are now being spread throughout multiple departments and multiple funds, it was more difficult to do that. So I did it in that fashion. So we didn't lose that summary information as to what we pay individual employees.
Yeah, Stuart, you mentioned the successor agency, and so we have that $250,000 that we use to cover expenses such as, parts of people's salaries and stuff. Is there a perspective of what we paid last year? Did we get the 250 last year?
We did.
We did. Okay, so, all right. In your budget, do you show where that breakdown of where the 250 is spent? Because if we didn't get the 250, it would come out of the general fund.
Yes. What we show in the budget is the breakdown, and you already looked at the successor agency budget for personnel costs and non-personnel costs. So that's where it would be shown. And directly in the successor agency, we are no longer looking at it as a transfer coming back because they're two separate entities.
Yeah, and is I mean that 250, is that a max, or is that's the minimum, right?
No. So the amount you're allowed to collect is 3% of your former RDA's property tax, what they call RPTTF, or 250,000, whichever is higher.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to get into the rest of the explanation because I know Ray knows more knows more about this, and he's just waiting for me to finish.
Sorry about that. Okay.
No, that's okay. I can just see he's ready to jump.
Yeah.
So we either can get 250,000 or 3%. 250,000 is more than our 3%. So we are allowed the 250,000 if it's approved by the oversight board. Our oversight board has asked us to track our time, with the anticipation that I believe there may be members of the oversight board who believe that we will not be able to spend $220,000 on our time. It's a challenge for us this year.
Okay.
The way that they interpret it is that if we do not spend I think it's 220,000 we have in the budget. If we don't spend it, then next year they will not approve it. They'll just approve what we spent the previous year. Because the way that SB 1484, and Betsy went through and read it, and we'll talk to our attorneys to get a better clarification, is the oversight board doesn't have to approve the 250,000, but actually they did this year. But they also asked us to track our time for the upcoming year. And that's one of the reasons we haven't finished our property disposition forms, because we will finish that next year and allocate time to it.
Okay. But you're confident that the time will be shown to
I am
justify.
confident that we will figure out how to show the time.
Now, I have a question on that same vein. Wasn't it that we were allowed the 250,000, but in last year's budget, or in last year's successor agency refund, we were 6 months behind?
We are. So they show, we have to budget 6 months, actually we have to budget 6 months ahead. There was one point in time where we did not get our full allocation for administrative. And it was strange, and we're going back and we're working through that process to figure out why that happened. Because every year we also got residual money, but they also didn't allocate all of our admin money, and it may take us a couple of years to prove this out.
To work out the kinks. I just thought that
Right.
there was some sort of 50% lag that we had somewhere in the process.
There are many lags in the process, and I have to think about that because they think they're ahead of us, and what their problem is that they budget. So you just approved a ROPS in January for next July, and we're going to get our money in June for July through December. So we're now to the point where we're getting money advanced to us, and I will tell you that will create other accounting and bookkeeping issues. because since we're going to get money in June, they're going to ask us to book it into the current fiscal year. And so, in fact, it's for next fiscal year. So we're going to have money in reserve. It'll be one of those things that Betsy is going to have less hair at the end of the next year than this year over. And our auditors will have issues trying to figure out how to make all that
Better get a wig,
make
Betsy.
sense. Well, the challenge is, so we're going to get money in, I'm going to go in way too much detail. We're going to get money in June for next fiscal year, so we're going to show it as revenue this year. And we're going to be back into that same issue that we have with the Board of Equalization on sales tax, that we're getting money in the wrong year. And at some point, it's going to catch up to us. And I don't quite know when that some point will be.
But we're already half a year sort of behind or off kilter.
Yeah, it is.
So-
It's just,
And it was just a point I wanted to
Yeah.
make, not to explain.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I just love budget so much. We're budgeting $190,000 for the city attorney contract. This is about what we have spent in the past for all of our city attorney services through the city attorney. It used to be through personnel, now it's just through a contract. And that will actually be determined based on the number of hours that a contract attorney works, as well as how we negotiate that contract. We're budgeting $75,000 for the general plan update assistance in the community development department. As I said, that's been money we've now budgeted twice. So that money is going to fall into reserves in 12-13, and we'll take it out of reserves for 13-14. We're budgeting $10,000 for the Crocker Park charrette. This will be coming forward to you as part of the economic development plan in August, but we're anticipating that. You've already talked about it. We're budgeting an additional $3,000 for planning commission training. Last year we reduced training and travel, so this is one of those areas where we felt that additional money would be useful. Police department, we eliminated one office position, as I talked about. We've added 2 other police officers. We're budgeting $36,000 for a new police car. And Lisa will be able to go into much more detail about this when she goes over the police budget on June 10th. But it's because we can no longer buy the same model vehicle that we have now.
No more Crown Vic.
No more Crown Vics. And because we can't buy Crown Vics, the equipment we have for the Crown Vics will no longer work on the new vehicle. So whereas before we used to just take off the light bar and we used to take equipment and shift it from one car to the next, we can't do that. So therefore there's going to be additional cost to us for equipment.
Yeah, they're
and there has been in the
round
past.
now.
If we need
More
it.
smaller and.
But we do, I mean, they're recommending that we get a new vehicle based on the time.
The cars are more round and smaller. You know, so we'll save on gas.
Oh, okay. But once you put the light bar on, doesn't it ruin the air? Never mind. Fire, there's no large changes in the fire department. Public Works, as I said in the opening, there's more landscape maintenance work being done under contract instead of in-house. So that was why we shifted from personnel to supplies and services. Parks and Recreation, we changed for the most part from an account-based budget to a program-based budget for our supplies and services. I'll spend a lot more time with that when I go through the Parks and Recreation budget on June 3rd. Marina, no major changes from an operational perspective, but obviously we do have the issues on the funding and we have the issues on the capital projects that we'll talk about on June 10th. Non-departmental, we budgeted $38,000 for the history book. Capital projects, what we anticipate being funded is the wood and dock replacement and flotation and dredging analysis. That's going to be funded out of marina fees. Replacement of the finance computer funded by business license tax. Water and sewer projects funded by water, a debt service to be repaid by an increase in water and sewer rates. The Facilities Committee has already looked at that as a potential. I'll talk more about that during the capital improvement plan and then bring back a more thorough analysis at some later point. Street maintenance, as we do every year, would be funded by street revenue sources. Fire station remodel would be funded by business license tax allocated to the capital projects fund. One issue that isn't there that the Parks and Recreation Commission is going to recommend, and I'll talk about it at the June 3rd meeting, is funding for design of a skateboard park. And I'll talk about more of that and how that, the Parks and Recreation Commission's perspective on how that could be funded. Budget process going forward. So I'm hoping that in June, you're going to review and adopt the budget for 2013, that you'd review and adopt the projects for the CIP, capital improvement plan, that you're going to review and adopt a fee schedule. I'll bring that forward on June 10th. That you're going to review and adopt the GAN limit. I'll bring that forward actually on June 17th, because that's more of a pro forma kind of thing that we have to do. That you're going to review the economic development program in August. We're going to develop policies next year for a recession or more of a recessions-oriented budget. That the finance subcommittee would be looking through at that during the fiscal year. That we'll be looking at how do we fund capital projects on an ongoing basis. That would be going through at least the facility subcommittee, if not both the facilities and finance subcommittee. And that we would do more of a debrief on this year's budget and talk more about a program-based budget going forward and how it works, what kind of information council needs, and that would be being done by the finance subcommittee. That was my best quick ability to do it. Any questions?
That was very good. Thank you.
Did I do it so fast that no one has questions? Even better for me.
Yeah, no, just
Lisa's
look forward to getting
still
into the details next time. Next meeting.
Yeah, I think we have all of us have a lot of specific questions about various detailed parts of the budget, but I think, I would guess that the general overview is fairly clear to all of us, and so therefore we don't need to
Okay.
pursue that much further. My observation is that it's still probably, and I'm thinking now more about explanation to the public, as we were talking about in the various things. I think there's still a little bit of clarity could be added to the difference between the overall budget and the general fund budget.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put a slide up front for both to explain what the funds are for. I mean, it would be hard to do it here, but I can.
Right, no.
Yeah.
I'm just reacting.
Right.
When you were going through all the slides, and I was thinking, if I were watching this, someone trying to sort all this out, it's not totally clear, okay, what the amounts are and why the amounts are different. Some people think we have, a lot more money than we really do, because really a lot of that, all funds is really tied up in debt service.
Right. And
To me, it's really important to make that clear so people don't think we have a lot of money that we don't have.
right. I mean, we have a lot of money that's for particular reasons, as you say, for debt service, for water and sewer, for the marina that can't be spent on other items. So yeah, I can put I can put a couple of slides for explanation for that. That makes sense. And then, as you know, if you have particular questions about any individual department budget, or overall questions about what I did in the budget document, my door is open. Not only for council members, but I am anybody from the public who may be watching this and wants to have a deep, further understanding, a better understanding. I am more than happy to take as much time as needed to walk people through the budget and what everything is in it.
And the only other thought that I had was kind of a response to one of the members of the public, one of the voters, picking out the thing that they want to do and then saying, oh, there's this money over here. See, such and such a fund is in reserve. But what needs to be pointed out is that we have a lot of deferred capital projects. I don't know, something like 35 million in water and sewer alone. And so, I mean, we need to address the issue of dredging, but it's not the only thing out there that we have to worry about funding. And so when we look at the capital budget, we're going to be talking about what we're going to fund this year, but maybe we might want to think also about all the stuff out there that we need to be thinking about in terms of the total capital obligations that we need to do over time. And we've had the study of the water and sewer. It's a little bit out of date now, probably needs to be updated. But there are a lot of other things too, the street maintenance program, and we just go on and on. There's a lot of things that we have to worry about their maintenance and their upkeep and make sure we spend enough on them so that people understand that we're setting some kind of allocation and priorities, and anything that comes along that looks good, isn't necessarily looked at in and of itself. you have to look at it in terms of all the other things you could do with a limited pile of money.
Right, and that's why one of the issues, that Clay talked about earlier, that, truly an issue that needing further study is our entire capital improvement plan.
Right.
Absolutely. And, we would anticipate working on that again this fiscal year to be, and we may not bring it as part of the budget next year, but maybe ahead of the budget next year. I know staff has been working on trying to refresh some of the numbers. I know Parks and Recreation Commission has gone through their capital improvement needs and have come up with priorities for them, for theirs as well. So yeah, I could tell you that Parks and Recreation could spend $3 million without blinking an eye if they had their desires.
Right.
So I think you're right. There are needs throughout the city.
Right.
We're limited on the amount of bonded debt that we could do. Is that correct? As far as legally?
There are limits as to what we can do without voter approval. Yes. Because without voter approval, you need to be able to have an asset to offset. You can't just bond against your general fund revenues. What we normally do is we do a lease revenue bond. So we have something that we put up as a collateral asset. And then what we do is basically have the Brisbane Financing Authority own it, and then we lease it from them. Mm-hmm. So we have that limit as to how much we can borrow based on that. And I'd have to go back and check the law to see if there's a maximum amount of debt.
Yeah, maybe that's something you can send to us later or something.
Yes.
I don't expect you to have it off the top of your head. But, to Clay's point about money being as cheap as it is right now, at some point in time, it's going to reverse and start going back up. And that time might be sooner rather than later. I don't know if we got about a year window or what exactly. But, given the real estate market seems to really have done a turnaround thus far. And, all the economic trends are showing an ascending scale. So usually what goes along with that is interest rates.
Yes.
Goes right along with it. So it just might be something that we want to look at as far as what we can do. And, I know Randy has been chomping at the bit, man, for years to do some of this capital stuff. And it's kind of, maybe we need to put more in there.
Okay.
It's just to kind of do a analysis of that, and figure out what we're doing, where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time with you today, so I don't have any questions on this except for one thing. Clay, you and I talked a couple weeks ago. There's a grant, and I think it's a MTC grant, isn't it? A Metropolitan Transportation Commission open space. Believe it or not.
Right.
I think it's $4 million or something like that.
Well, I think there's $4 million that they're granting out. John Swicky did attend that workshop.
You did, okay.
And so we'll get that information back to you.
I guess maybe just to update the rest of the council if you're not aware of it, but there's grants for open space infrastructure or open space acquisition or open space maintenance and a whole litany of things. And I think that the 5K that we're putting in for the additional acres, you and I talked about that the money that we were going to purchase that most recent acre with, it's kind of being held up right now, would probably qualify for that. And then also, you being on the HCP trustee board, we should ask for a lot of money for the maintenance of HCP area. And then maybe this 5K, for the acres maintenance, that may fall in there. And maybe the whole thing is at least have no shame and ask for 20K. Is that...
Yeah, I know John went to the workshop, and I talked to Sam Hersberg with San Mateo County with regards to the HCP. So I think, like you said, maybe there's probably no downside to putting applications in, and maybe that's what we should do. And it sounds to me like it's going to be really competitive because there's not a lot of money given. That $4 million was I think pretty much the whole Bay Area, wasn't it?
For what is it, seven counties, 9 counties?
Yeah.
9 counties in the Bay Area? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that can get stretched pretty thin, pretty quick. But, if, I think that it'd probably be worthwhile at least putting an application in and seeing where we might sit.
Does this money require being in a priority conservation area?
Yeah, it
Yes.
does, have
So you
that.
got to apply for that too.
Well, you have to be either in it or within a certain distance of it.
Right.
Yes.
So we probably won't be in it.
Priority
Be-
development area, you mean?
No,
Oh, conservation area.
conservation areas.
Yeah.
Different, it's a different category.
Right, and it's, you don't have to be, as I understand it, and again, I think it would probably be good for John to maybe just give us a report, but as I understand it, you don't have to necessarily be in it, but you have to be within a certain distance of it.
Sphere of influence.
Okay, so we need to find out more about that.
Right,
Okay,
but if we qualify, then it's probably worth giving it a shot,
sure.
but just with the understanding that, it's not a lot of money given, the number of counties that's open to.
Sure, but I mean, with the HCP being the first HCP here on San Bernardino Mountain, it was woefully underfunded or not funded at all. That, to me, it's a priority conservation area. I'm sure that they see that too, and
Yeah, it's definitely,
It's worth looking at, yeah.
all they can do is say no, right?
exactly.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have any other questions or comments on the whole?
See, the chief is smiling, the chief of police, for potentially getting 2 new officers, and I think that's gonna be great. I certainly support that,
And if you notice when you go through the detailed budget, that as we add the new officers, we would anticipate a reduction in overtime as well.
Which is the whole reason,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Ron's smiling too, the other chief is smiling, just because he's a happy guy.
And I kept to my hour promise.
Yeah, right. Okay, no, I think we've covered the waterfront and looks, pretty solid, and we're appreciative of that. And we got a lot more detail to look into on subsequent dates of 3, 10, and 17, and I'm beginning to think if we really get into a lot of depth on the marina, we might need that meeting on the 11th too. Yeah, okay, just to remind everybody. Yeah. Okay, unless there's anything else,
Thank you.
Do you want to receive this by motion, or no? Just a presentation? We're good.
yeah, right.
We have you on record as receiving it.
Yeah, okay,
We got you videotaped now.
all right. So, we are, I could declare that we're adjourned, or you can have a motion if you want.
So moved.
Well,
Okay, we're all adjourned, right?
Good.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think this is a record for our